Okay, so earlier in the week, Sony made its latest financial statement, and typically, usually they're quite anodyne things. You don't really learn too much. You get a small insight into what's happening in the corporate world. But this time there are sort of a range of alarming statements or fascinating statements, depending on how you want to look at it. I would say it's probably alarming because there's the report now that in the wake of this financial statement, Sony's shares dropped more than they have in the last 2 years. So obviously there was a certain degree of negative reaction to this. But I guess the thing that stands out the most is that we're kind of, 3.5 years now into the current console generation. PlayStation 5 has been around that long. And Sony is actually predicting that sales have peaked. And we're now in the quote unquote latter stages of the console generation. Now, typically, if a console generation lasts 7 years, we're kind of now at the midpoint, even though it doesn't really feel like it.
No.
And obviously, there was a lot of discussion about what they're going to do about it. And one of those strategies is to be much more aggressive with their PC releases. There was also the other statement that none of their franchise series are going to have any kind of sequels appearing until at least April 2025. John, where do you want to start with this? There's a lot to unpick here. What about this concept that we are at the latter stages of the PlayStation 5 generation?
I mean, I think if we assume a 7-year kind of cycle, then yeah, it makes sense. We're moving into the latter half. I don't think they're saying, a lot of people interpreted this as like, oh, it's over, or like we're at the end, but no, they're just saying the latter half. And I think it's pretty obvious when you think about the business perspective. We're in the halfway point basically, and now everything from here, it's not downhill specifically, but we're now heading towards the end of life in the next 3 to 4 years.
Right.
And I think that's completely normal.
Is it though? I mean, if you go back and look at prior console generations, what would Sony do in that particular time? What they would do is cost reduce the console, make it cheaper, and then get a critical mass of more players involved, right? But what we're finding here is that they've actually announced that they've got a cost reduced version of the PlayStation 5, but the parts to make it have increased in cost, which have eliminated the idea that they can actually sell them in that kind of mass market way they've done in previous generations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is actually the problem they're facing in terms of that. I think that timing wise, it's really similar to prior generations, at least the last two generations. But yes, they seem to be struggling to reduce the cost of making these machines due to parts prices, which does sort of take away that mass market sort of fervor, right? Because when you were starting to sell PS2s, I don't know, they hit like 149 or something. I can't remember the order of the price drops, but as they dropped in price, you get more and more people jumping on board. And right now, it's still a $500 machine. I guess technically
Yeah.
that was is the digital. Did they increase? Actually, I forget.
They increased the price on the digital, but I think the point is that, in sales periods, we have seen the disc PlayStation 4 reach prices as low as $400. But I
right
think the point possibly being raised is that that is the ceiling. They can't go
lower
any
than that.
lower than that. That is as far as they can push it.
That's troublesome for a lot of reasons beyond just the PlayStation. I think that the fact that we've reached this point where this sort of cost reduction no longer seems feasible.
To be fair, John, we had warning of this way back in
Oh,
2020
yeah, they
when
told
we
us
sat
right at
down.
Microsoft,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they just basically said we can't cost reduce the Xbox Series X.
Yep.
This is the only way we can produce a $299 console is to make the Series S, and why wait if we can do it now? And
Yeah, that's so interesting.
They
yeah,
were completely
it's kind
correct
of
on
true.
that.
I guess the reason why I reacted to this in a slightly negative way, due to the wording, was because software-wise, it doesn't feel like we're at the over the hump
Nope.
going downhill. I just think of like the Xbox 360 or generation, where the first 3 years of the PS3 and Xbox 360, they're obviously, they didn't start at the exact same time, but the amount of kind of genre defining games that came out during that time period, iconic things, you have your Uncharted 2s, your Demon Souls, you have Gears of War, you have Halo 3, I don't know, Oblivion.
Yeah, I think your point is they're not really happening.
They're just not happening. And so it didn't feel like and those were next gen exclusive games or current gen exclusive games at that time point. And so we haven't had, I mean, I've really enjoyed Returnal. I talked about this yesterday on Slack. I was like, man, Sony got Returnal out of this.
That's really good. That's probably
it's like their best game they've made, I think, this generation.
Oh my God,
and it's like, ooh, it's like that, but there's like the rest of them are like cross-gen stuff.
I still think the Demon Souls remake
re-releases
is really
of old
good.
games.
It's a remake, but it's freaking awesome.
Yeah, but I guess that's why it's not totally something.
Well, did you ever
see.
play Demon Souls the original through?
I've played it on RPCS3. Yes,
through.
Yeah. No, I didn't get past the Mind Flayer place.
Oh God, the Mind Flayer.
The Mind Flayer. Did I say that correctly?
Flayer. Flayer.
Yeah. No, I haven't beaten it, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I feel like the interesting
I agree.
Current gen exclusive games, and I'm not talking about platform exclusive, just current gen exclusive games hasn't been there so far this generation, and it's been a little bit uneventful, especially those first 2 years.
I mean,
other than Returnal.
I think the problem is twofold there, or multiple fold. Obviously, games take more time to develop. They're costing more, thus they want to retain that previous generation install base, hence cross-gen. There was the pandemic as well, which I think further slowed things down. And you take all of these things together, and it's like the console cycle is trying to operate as normal, but we've reached a point where developers just can't make the stuff fast enough. And they also don't necessarily want to commit that specifically to hardware where the install base is still lower, which is why I think cross-gen lasted so long, because when games are this expensive to make and take this long, why would you want to limit your audience? Because technologically, with the way games scale these days, with the way engines scale these days, it certainly isn't difficult to, I mean, there's challenges, but, scaling down to last gen machines isn't that insane anymore. It used to be. If you were using any of the new, like, you're not going to do all the stuff that we saw on like a 360 on a PS2, for instance, right? It was not possible to do it. Like, it couldn't be done. And as a result, you didn't see much of that. When we went from PS3 to PS4, there was actually a pretty big cross-gen period as well. Less so, but it still existed. But because those were also somewhat different hardware, the last-gen versions were often like genuinely terrible, like borderline unplayable, shouldn't have been sold. I'm looking at you, Shadow of Mordor. You should not have been made. It was terrible. But now, especially with PCs and needing to scale down to lower end PCs, the popularity of the Switch, like, and just the way engines work, it's so scalable. It's like, I'm sure developers are like, why would we even bother like not shipping a last gen version in most cases, unless there's a financial incentive to not do that.
We finally reached the end of the cross-gen, really, right?
We've just reached it, really.
It's taken like 3.5 years to get there. But yeah, the strategy from Sony seems to be to accelerate the PC side of the business, which I think is a really good idea. The question is how, similar to the whole enraging fanboys on the Microsoft side, how they do that on the PC, on the PlayStation side, because even their existing strategy has enraged some people. I honestly think that it is a bubble within certain communities on Twitter. I don't think too many people care otherwise. But, we've just seen this week with the release of Helldivers 2, which was a cross-platform day-and-day release on PlayStation 5 and PC, that it's actually turned out rather well.
It's turned out it's their best release game ever or something.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest Steam game.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the issue that they've had with their existing Steam strategy is that, Horizon Zero Dawn came out. It shifted millions of copies on PC years after it arrived on PlayStation. I think there was a certain degree of interest in seeing what a PlayStation game looked like on PC, but there does seem to have been diminishing returns on sales of other sort of story-driven first-party conversions since then. And I think maybe the concept of waiting, 18 months, 2 years to play these games on PC is not going down particularly well as a great strategy. They're leaving money on the
I
table.
agree. I think they could make a lot of money if they were there day and date on the PC.
Especially at full
At
price.
full
It's always
price,
the
like,
thing. Like,
holy moly.
like, why am I 2-year-old game full price? That seems weird.
I mean, obviously the challenge there would be on the back end in terms of with the way they're structured. You know, their teams making these games are focusing on the console versions, so that would mean you need to have like Nixies or whoever else working alongside them as the game's being made, which we know that does add some challenge to it, obviously. Because a lot of their teams are still working with proprietary tech, right? It's not like Unreal Engine here most of the time. So there is still that, but I think they should try to do it. I know it would ruffle feathers, but you know, I think they would make a lot of money doing that. It's good. It's good for everyone. PC gamers would benefit a lot as well. I know Alex is thinking like, yeah, definitely. This is the strategy. Screw those fanboys. Bring it to PC, baby.
I mean, I guess there's some of the games I wouldn't be so interested in, and I haven't been interested in. I just cover them because, you know, I'm interested in the technological story. But like other ones, like I really wish Returnal was there, like back in the day, like when it came out. I don't know how well that sold,
Such a good game.
but I really wish it got the audience. I feel like it was a PC almost kind of game
In a way.
and it was in a lot of ways. Yeah, I would be excited to see this occur. And I think it's a great way for them to grow the market for themselves. Just like with Xbox, there's just who's buying PS5s? Is it people who already owned a PS4 in the past? That means you're not really growing. You're just like transitioning to new hardware and selling the same games again. So I think this would be a great way to get people playing more PlayStation games. I'm just curious, like how they would do it. I haven't been like, I think the Nixies produced stuff is generally pretty great, but I think almost everything else has been generally really bad at launch.
Quite.
So like Sackboy.
Helldivers 2 is fine though, right? Like it's missing some features.
Helldivers 2 is actually it's good. I'd actually say it's more polished than I saw with Ratchet and Clank at launch. Just because like when we played Ratchet and Clank at launch, like textures weren't loading
issues,
and stuff like that, and there was issues like that. Like Helldivers 2 launched, other than the server situation, which I don't think they could have forecast that the game would be so stupidly successful. So I think that's the main issue right now with the game. Helldivers 2 is really good. I would just like to see them up their quality if they're going to expect like full day and date prices for these games, because the quality has been pretty uneven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even the Nixie stuff required time to get right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's yeah. So they obviously need more hands on deck or more time. It doesn't need to be day and date, but if it's like 3 months later or 4 months later or whatever, that's awesome.
That would be fine.
No one cares.
Actually, maybe that's a good strategy then.
Yeah, maybe.
What about a year? I mean, we were talking earlier about Xbox games coming to PlayStation in maybe a year. I mean, is that a year too long in this scenario? I think the issue here is that, I don't know, it becomes another sort of marketing beat if it's closer to the launch. You know, it actually reignites interest in all versions of the game.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. I mean, there is also the story that there aren't going to be any of these mega franchise story-driven games happening until at least April 2025. But I think, again, this may have been misconstrued as, you know, okay, we haven't got God of War, The Last of Us, or, one of those huge Horizon-level games, but we've still got games. There was the rumor that there's going to be an Astrobot title coming at some point this year.
Oh, man, I hope that's so true.
Yeah.
That would be the most exciting thing they've done this entire generation, alongside Returnal, I would say. So that the Astrobot thing included with PS5 is amazing as is. The VR game is, I think it's the best thing that ever existed on PSVR and still one of the best VR games ever made. Like these guys are really good. They're really good. So if they've been given the budget to do a full game at that level, for all systems, not VR necessarily, it could be something special.
Well, it kind of leads us into this question from Dissector. Could all the doom at PlayStation and Xbox perhaps lead to more AA experiences like the excellent RoboCop Rogue City? The success of Nintendo with smaller, Tears of the Kingdom single-player experiences would suggest there is a market for games that aren't colossal open-world time sinks. This should hopefully enable more games to actually come out and decrease the albatross of risk hanging on the neck of every single release. I think we'd be kind of broadly in favour of that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would love
to
see.
To do.
That's what I've been talking about. Yeah, that's what they used to do. That's what was great about PlayStation, and is no longer really great about them today. That's what the whole focus was this whole range of titles, from the quirky stuff to single, double, triple A, all kinds of stuff across the board. You got it all. And now it's like not that. Lots of sad dads and open worlds.
Third-person games. You like?
I do actually like. I mean, I like the games still. Don't get me wrong. I think they're still making great games. It's just I want to see more variety and more stuff and smaller scale.
What do you think of the PS5 Pro? Do you think it's still happening? Because there's obviously no mention of it. There's an idea of to extend the generation and to prop up sales.
I would think but we'll see.
I guess the one thing that you just talked about earlier, how they have the parts to make a size reduced PlayStation 5, but the cost of it would be too much. They couldn't make money off of it, so there's no point in bringing it out. That implies that the PlayStation 5 can't be cost reduced. So if there is a theoretical PS5 Pro, it's going to be more expensive to buy
I think we've been
for a
saying
consumer
that
than whatever
really.
PS5. Yeah. So I guess the question is like how much more expensive at that point. And I guess it's still, people said like, what was it, November 2024?
Yeah, that's
that.
the mooted release date.
Mooted.
It's coming out in the summer, baby.
So,
let's get ready.
But not talking about it already. Yeah, maybe it's the thing where they're going to do some sort of there's no E3 anymore. What am I talking about? There's going to be some sort of not Games Fest in June or
May. There's an IGN one happening now.
About it then.
Yep.
It's going to be IGN versus Jeff. The gloves
goodness,
are off.
Yeah. I do like the idea of a not Games Fest though. IGN versus Jeff versus not Games Fest.
Yeah, so they'll talk about that in the future, I guess, then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of interested now because obviously Microsoft are saying they've got this largest technical leap of all time. And I honestly thought that we're going to be looking at a transition away from console generations and back to the sort of iterative model that we kind of see in smartphones, but probably not that extreme. A new console every 3 or 4 years, and then the last two remain viable. If you see what I mean, continual cross.
Yeah.
Maybe what they really mean is just like we're going all in on PC. It's like you see this 4090 or whatever. It's like got this. You put
this is an Xbox.
This is the new Xbox, baby.
Slap an Xbox on like a sticker.
Yeah, that's right.
Decal.
They have like a PC. They rotate it around and then slap a sticker on that bad boy, and it's like now it's an Xbox, most powerful in the world.
Oh, that'd be sick. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd pay money.
They
to
should
see
sell a
people do
PC
that.
case in the shape of that original Xbox prototype, the big X, the big metal
Do it.
X.
Oh god.
I've got no idea how you would actually put your components in it, mind you, unless it's extremely large.
Well, it was
Extremely.
I mean,
yeah,
more
it's
than
the
that.
size of like a coffee table.
You'd probably do
isn't
like
it?
a mini ITX version. I don't know what you'd put in that would like sit into one of the quadrants of the X.
Yeah,
Maybe your GPU in another, power supply in another.
Each quadrant is a chunk.
And the fourth,
the motherboard.
the fourth one is a
3D.
cooler, literally just for drinks and stuff.
That's awesome.
Dear.
Wait,
Okay,
they did the Xbox Series X fridge, but I'm just thinking, like, what if the adorably digital one? It looks more like circular.
Trash can.
It's like, yeah, exactly. They actually make a trash can because
They did the toaster.
Apple
too,
did
for the
Apple
Series
did
S,
the trash
didn't they?
can Mac, and
I was about to
but
say
they never
could
actually
have the adorably all digital Mac Pro.
yes.